Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for our webinar this afternoon. We'll give folks a couple of minutes to get in here and join us for a very timely topic. We will be talking about navigating the impact of rising tariffs. And we have a special guest with us today who has a wealth of knowledge in this topical area. So please, as you come in, say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're at in the country. We would love to say hello. So we'll kick things off around 2:32. Good afternoon. Wonderful. So glad to have everybody with us. Please let us know where you're at in the chat, where you're joining us from. We have Northern California. Nice to see you, Miss Hogan. Also, we have Virginia in the chat. Hi, Dr. Collins, Massachusetts, Greensboro, North Carolina.
Right.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar series. We will be talking about a hot topic that I'm sure everyone is following in the ag world. We will be talking about navigating the impact of rising tariffs. Next slide, please. So before we get started, I want to just clarify a couple of housekeeping rules. So this webinar will be recorded and it will be posted to the Freedmen Heirs Foundation website and YouTube channel. Also, as you all probably are well aware of, all attendees' cameras are off and the microphones are muted. However, we will be accepting questions at the end of Mr. Gray's presentation. So please utilize the chat and the Q&A functions, and we will make sure that we are able to get to your questions. Also, again, all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. We want to make sure that we give Mr. Gray undivided time and attention while he's going through his presentation. Next slide, please. And for those of you who are new with us today during this webinar series, my name is Seneca Edwards Heron, and I am the founder and executive director of Freedmen Heirs Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization that supports Black and underserved producers across the country. Our mission is to empower Black and underserved farmers to build generational wealth by expanding market access, technical assistance, and enhancing financial resilience. Next slide, please. So our special guest for today is Mr. Quintin Gray of Agricultural Trade Advisor and President and CEO of Q Gray and Associates. I will now turn the presentation over to Mr. Gray, and he'll provide a little bit of background about himself as he navigates into his webinar presentation today.
First of all, I want to thank the Freedmen Heirs Foundation for inviting me to talk today about tariffs and the impact that they will have on farmers and businesses. I am someone who has been dealing in trade for many, many years. As an agriculture counselor in Africa, at the U.S. embassies in Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, Europe. And so I've been involved with this trade issue for a long, long, long time. And so when the first trade war impacted the U.S., I was working as a consultant, working on a food safety project in China and had contracts lined up, ready to go, ready to provide services to Chinese companies in food safety. And then the trade war hit. That was around 2018. So I personally understand the impact of tariff. So with that said, and And then my academic background is economics and bachelor and master's in economics. So I understand quite a few things about tariffs that a lot of people, when you listen to the press, might not follow. But before the end of this presentation, I hope that I'll answer all of your lingering questions about the impact of tariffs and what they really mean for you and your businesses or organizations. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Dealing with trade and the impact of rising tariffs. Any business or any organization in this environment needs to understand that the trade war that our government started not so long ago is going to have a lingering impact. It's not going to be something that you're going to feel right away. It's not going to be something that could be corrected easily. And once I explain the trade process and take you through how trade really works, then you're going to understand why we're in, I would say, somewhat of a predicament, because we are in uncharted territories in so many ways. So what are you going to learn at this webinar? I'm going to talk about trade. What is trade? We're going to talk about tariffs and what they actually mean. I'm going to talk about trade deficits and explain it to you in a way I hope it will be simple. And then I'm going to talk about what impact all of this is going to have on your businesses or your organizations. And then I'm going to say what I believe you should do. These are my opinions. Don't go to the bank with my opinions. Just know that they are my thoughts of having worked in international trade for so many years and knowing the impact that that trade has on the local economy and on the US economy. Just take that as my assessment. So trade is quite simple. And I love this little picture, which shows the simple part of trade when the caveman, I wish I had a rock, and I wish I had a stick. And they exchange things. That's barter economy. Now we have financial systems. We have all kinds of stocks. We have dollars. We have all kinds of agreements and everything that's worked out. So trade could be complicated, but in the end of the day, it's simple. You have something I want, or either I have something you want, and we make a means to exchange those things. So here I am about 4 or 5 years ago in Qatar. And I'm going to go ahead and answer the question. No one offered me an airplane when I was in Qatar. I wish they had, but they didn't. So Mr. Laurie, the gentleman in the middle, is the chairman of the Laurie Group, and his company and his deputy, they've been importing food from the United States for more than 70 years. And his father started the company. And I was there to talk to him about 4 or 5 years ago about importing Texas peanuts and pecans. So trade takes time. Trade is developed. It doesn't happen overnight. Any sales we would have made to this company took months and years to negotiate. So I was thinking about how do I explain the trade process in a very simple term. I had my coffee this morning, and if you're a coffee drinker, I hope you had your coffee this morning. A lot of your coffee comes from Ethiopia, and Ethiopia in East Africa is a huge country. A lot of people don't realize how many people are in Ethiopia. There are about 128 million people, Ethiopians. So it's the second largest country in Africa behind Nigeria in terms of population. But what is Ethiopia known for? It's known for coffee. Coffee is their foreign exchange earner, is what they get their money, how they get their foreign exchange. And they have, as part of their culture, what's called the coffee ceremony. And this young lady is pouring coffee in cups. And then they also serve popcorn with the coffee. Now, I have no idea Well, they got the combination of coffee and popcorn, but it tastes pretty good. I've tried it, and almost every restaurant, major restaurant or major entertainment place in Ethiopia has someone who's serving coffee and popcorn. I want to take coffee as an example of a trade item. And I could use almost anything, but coffee to me is very simple to understand. So with any product, you have to have producers. And so in this case, you have the Ethiopian coffee farmers, they're planting the seeds, they're harvesting the crop, etc. So that's a process that takes place. That's manufacturing, manufacturing in the farmer's sense. And involved with manufacturing, you have the government entity. The government actually sends out testers in Ethiopia, go like extension agents that go to the farms that make certain that the quality of the Ethiopian coffee is up to international standards. And then the government developed a grading system at the picture on the right side where the quality of the product is being ensured. This is research and development. This is money paid by the government of Ethiopia, also by companies that are involved with the trade process. So Ethiopia harvests this coffee every year and sells it internationally for the most part. Of course, they consume coffee in the country, but they also have the coffee for export. And the US is a major import of Ethiopian coffee. And Starbucks, I'm going to use them as an example, they import Ethiopian coffee. And so Starbucks has made an investment in its stores, it's made an investment in storage facility. Also, it has to do its own testing to make certain that the product is up to par. So there's money expended. I'm making a point of this money being expended because this is an integral part of the trade process, is that there are financial outlays made and that the money is being spent from the exporter side. There's money that's being spent on the importer side, and that's the way trade takes place. And I wanted to make a point about the coffee. Coffee, even before the latest US tariffs, was at a 13-year high in terms of the price. And the reason why is because the demand has outstripped supply. So there are a lot more people who want to drink coffee than coffee is available. That's to keep it simple. And so for that reason, already the coffee prices are at historically high levels. And so the impact of the recent tariff, the tariffs that our administration just announced on April the 2nd, it would result in a 10% increase in the cost of that Ethiopian cup of coffee you drink in the morning at Starbucks. So what would that mean? That means that if implemented on July the 31st as proposed, then a cup of coffee will go up about 10%. And who pays that 10%? Okay, I may have glossed over it in a previous slide, but the importer, Starbucks, is going to pay that 10%. And in a real economic sense, in a real world economy, Starbucks will pass that cost on to the consumer, and you'll end up paying it, even though the government would have collected that 10%. But you'll end up paying it because most companies are going to pass that cost on to the consumer. They're not going to eat the cost. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So here we are. So Ethiopia is saying, goodness gracious, if we have to pay 10% more, then the demand for our coffee might go down, or it might not. It depends. It depends on what tariffs the US is going to charge South American countries, Brazil, Peru, and Colombia. They are the competing countries against Ethiopian coffee exported to the United States. So if their tariff rates are high, the Ethiopian tariff rates are high, In that case, it may not be an impact. It may not be an impact on the on Ethiopian coffee exports, but it most likely will be an impact on the price that you're going to pay for coffee in general, not only Ethiopian coffee. What I provided in this chart, and I'm not going to go through it, is sort of a verbal explanation of all of the things that are involved in the trade process. And when you get a copy of the slide, you can actually go through this and it explains everything I just said. What are tariffs? Now, there are a lot of people who are confused about tariff, but I'm not one of them because I pretty much think I understand it. I understand it because I know tariffs, they are a tax, they are imposed by the government, they're collected by the government. The big fear about tariffs by well-known economists is that the tariffs are going to lead to higher prices because they're going to be passed on to the consumer, or it may make it so that folks will say, I'm drinking coffee once a day now, but maybe I might want to cut about 2 or 3 times a week instead of drinking it every day because it costs too much. Instead of paying $5 for a Starbucks Starbucks cafe latte, you might have to pay $6 for a cafe latte. And then some people say, I'm not paying that much for that coffee. Maybe they may not drink the coffee from Starbucks. They may buy it from the grocery store and drink it and make it at home. But the impact of it all, tariffs, and the fear is that it will cause economic decline and a reduction in demand. What do trade deficits mean? Boy, I have seen so much sort of, I don't want to put it politely, misinformation out there about a trade deficit. And I want to make certain I can make it clear here. Trade deficits only mean that you have one country that the consumers in the other country says we want what they have, or vice versa. And at the end of the day, there is more of what they want or we want from them than they want from us or can afford. And I put that can afford is because I'm going to show you an example later in the presentation when there's a country that would love to buy US product, they can't afford it. And so that distorts what trade deficits mean. So the US has traditionally run trade deficits. This is nothing new. We've been running trade deficits for years. But the point I want to make is trade deficits do not mean that we're not gaining financially. We gain financially even if there are trade deficits, because you have transportation costs that are getting paid, the research and development funds that are being expended, there are importers, there are shipping costs, there are industries that depend on trade, and all of that, even if it would be better if we were in surplus with all other countries, but that's not realistic. There's a thing called comparative advantage. Some people can do things better than we can, and we have to recognize that. We cannot produce Ethiopian coffee or coffee in general. We have a little coffee coming out of Hawaii and maybe on one other location. But for the most part, we're not coffee producers, so we need to import that coffee. So why are we going to charge these countries money or tax on product we cannot compete? This is a whole nother issue, but I'm not going to get into the politics of it all because I'm an economist. I'm going to stick with it. So this is the part that really blew people's mind with the current tariffs. US-Mexico-Canada agreement. As most of you know who follow these trade deals, this is a successor of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. I, by chance, was around working in international trade when NAFTA was signed and approved by Congress. And I remember well when the agreement was renegotiated. And a lot of people said, this is a great deal. So here we are, less than 5 years later, or 6 years later, maybe. And here we are negotiating or about to negotiate a totally new agreement. And I want to start with Mexico. Mexico is our second largest destination for US exports. the top source of U.S. imports. Over 80% of total Mexican goods were to the U.S. and 40% of Mexican imports were from the U.S. Mexico is our huge trade partner. I'm talking about billions of dollars. U.S. exports 300 in 2024, $334 billion to Mexico. It's hard for me to get my arms around that. And let's use Canada. Canada is our top U.S. destination for U.S. exports, third largest source of imports. And given that we just negotiated the USMCA with them 6 years ago, let's say, here we are in a situation where Canada is saying, we're no longer your best buddy in terms of trade. We're going to go out and seek other suppliers, because why are you going to charge us these tariffs on these products? This makes no sense. Now, just to give you a little background as to why this is so important, is that there are what are called trading blocs around the world. The US, Mexico, and Canada form a bloc of countries that work together in trade. And originally, when NAFTA was created, the North American Free Trade Agreement was created. It was created as a counterbalance to the European Union. So that's the way the US companies coalesced with Canada and Mexico, the closest neighbors, to actually fight against what was going on with the consolidation of the European Union. And then there are other trading blocs in Asia. And then I'll talk in a few minutes about a new one that's coming on the block, a new trading bloc that's being developed. But before I move on to the other parts of the presentation, I want to talk about China. We firmly believe, that if the US had done a second trade war with China only, we might have been okay. The deficit with China is high, $295.4 billion, the trade deficit is. But it's a situation where you can understand that China is trying to expand its territory. It has been known as sort of the bully on the block in Asia. So if we had picked another trade war with China only, I think a lot of the world would have said good, because a lot of the other world is suffering from China in terms of its trade policies, et cetera. But we didn't do that. We picked to fight with the world. So let's look at the trade deficits for China. You have the US-China tariff situation. I'm going to talk about the tariffs. And you can tell by this chart, during the first Trump administration, you didn't see anything over 30% in terms of the tariffs that were charged either way. Then the Biden administration kept the tariffs. But then we went through that tit for tat for the April the 2nd, where we had, I charge you, you charge me, and we got up to 125%, 145%. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Trade stopped. There are ships that have not left the ports. There is product that has been wasted because no one knew exactly what was going to happen. So shipping and trading stopped between the US and China. Now, when I was on that same trip in Qatar about 5 or 6 years ago, I went to Saudi Arabia as well. And I was talking to a Saudi importer and an importer of nuts. And I talked to that importer, and the importer told me, he said, the problem we have is we can't find a ship to send the products. It wasn't 5 or 6 years ago, because I remember now it was during COVID. So it had to been like 2020 or 22. And so what happened was, he said that we can't find the ships. And what would happen was the ships weren't leaving China. And then the ships did not leave China. They could not make it to the United States. And so traders who even had product they wanted to export couldn't export because there were no ships available. And if a ship were available, they had to pay so much for shipping that it didn't make economic sense. So this whole thing with China, if it had only been with China, I think that a lot, and now the rates are down to 30% of Chinese goods come into the United States is what companies would have to pay. But if U.S. exports agricultural products or whatever to China is a 10%. But 10%, if you are a farmer, 10% is a huge deal because that's only counting the tariff impact. Transportation costs, if that transportation cost goes up, storage costs, if that storage cost goes up, et cetera, then you're going to have a situation where it may not make economic sense for you to export that same amount to China and China's for agriculture, it's the largest U.S. export market. Between 34 and $40 billion worth of U.S. ag products are exported to China every year. We cannot ignore that. That is a huge market. And right now, over the past 2 to 3 months, trade has been stymied and stopped. And so the impact of that is not going to be felt for months down the road. So here we are, April the 2nd, when I hate to use the term Liberation Day, when reciprocal tariffs went into effect. And people say, what are reciprocal tariffs? What does that mean? It's a tariff, or what is a reciprocal? I already told you what a tariff is. Now I'm going to explain to you what a reciprocal tariff is. In a traditional sense, it's a mirror image of, let's say, if the US imposes a 10% tariff on a country, Ethiopia would retaliate and say, we are going to propose a 10% tariff on you. So it's pretty much apples to apples and apples. But when our administration decided to announce reciprocal tariffs, it did something different. This formula, the one you're looking at, is going to go down in infamy. I want to put it. Not a good idea. And the reason why I say that is because it cannot be replicated, meaning that you have all the same numbers, you won't come up with the same result. So, and why cannot it be replicated? It's because look at the formula itself. All right, first of all, you can read all those little bullet points I made, but it talks about if the U.S. has a trade surplus, or if the delta T is less than 10%, then a 10% tariff will be charged on imports. So, Ethiopia is being charged at 10%. I guess it fell in at number 4. So it does not make sense because in the traditional sense, it's not a reciprocal tariff. It is an arbitrary tariff. And so when the Treasury Department or folks in the administration came up with the reciprocal tariffs, they took into consideration non-tariff barriers like pest and disease requirements and that sort of thing, or into whether or not a country stole intellectual property, or whether they behaved poorly in international trade, whatever that means. And then the reciprocal tariffs were arbitrary, meaning that a country didn't know what to make of it. They said, well, why are we being charged this? And that country's been charged that. So the confusion in how the reciprocal tariffs were calculated, and that confusion still remains today. So I want to use the example of Lesotho. Lesotho is a country in Southern Africa, around South Africa, surrounded by South Africa. So Lesotho is a very, very poor country. Its exports are $250 some odd million to, wait a minute. The picture thing isn't covering up my presentation, so I need to be able to read it. The U.S. exported 2.8 million worth of goods to Lesotho, mainly trucks, vaccines, and machinery. Lesotho exported $237.3 million worth of goods, mainly to the U.S., mainly textiles and rough diamonds. The U.S. has a trade deficit with Lesotho. So what in the world? How did this formula come up that Lesotho is going to be paying 50% tariffs if you import anything from Lesotho? According to the formula I just showed you, this country is going to be paying 50% tariffs on its products. It makes no common sense that that rate is being charged with a poor country that's in developing, that is part of the ecosystem of, let's say, the AGOA agreement, US Africa Growth Initiative. And, but at any rate, just want to give you one example of how the tariffs are being applied in a way that just boggles the mind. Now, what has been the impact of the tariffs? The stock market over the next few days after April 2nd dropped $6 trillion. The market has since recovered, but don't listen to that. Because if your individual stocks did not recover, lost money in the stock market during this time. And I'm still mad because that loss, and when they say that the market recovered, it doesn't mean that your individual stocks recovered. Your individual stocks could still be at historic lows, but yet the overall market could recover. A lot of people's retirement accounts, they just lost that money. Some of them just lost that money. And so what has happened is China used to be the big bad boy on the block. Everybody wanted to try to do something to China because China was doing it to everybody else. So what happened? Not only this year, but even starting before this year, last year, even before, there are countries called the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America, Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the UAE. All those countries decided that they were going to start working together on trade issues and develop themselves as a new bloc. They even talked about having some sort of currency, a way to facilitate trade in terms of developing ways to have currency that they could be able to use to do the trade. Now, that hasn't happened yet. Canada is looking for new trading partners. U.S. used to have a foot in Africa in terms of U.S. Agency for International Development, but that was all shut down overnight. So what happened? So that means that basically Africa has been ceded to China because China is the only other major power that's in Africa doing work in terms of development. So we're expecting increased prices, inflation will rise, reduced demand for U.S. products. Like I said before, Canada seeking other other markets, U.S. supply chain disruption, volatility in the U.S. stock. So some folks say, well, China's going to pay the tariff. Nope, China's not going to pay a tariff. The importers like Walmart, Amazon, Starbucks, etc., they know who's going to pay the tariffs, and they're already saying we're going to pass those on to the consumer. Now, the president decided that he was going to strong arm Walmart and Amazon, etc. But I hate to tell you folks, but in the international trade, there are hundreds of thousands of companies that import. These by happen to be the biggest ones, but there are a lot of other importers out there that are importing product from around the world. You cannot control the price for the whole world. There's the issue. So this picture, this shipping picture in the lower right, these ports in California are down as much, some people say 50 or 60% in shipping from China already. And you don't turn it overnight and correct it. It just doesn't happen like that. And the point I wanted to make is that in trade, there are a lot of people who get paid or get money. There are people in the cargo and distribution and freight and transportation, warehousing, logistics. All of these things are impacted by trade. So it means that we can't just say it's about, just about us, about whether or not we collect a 10%. There are a lot of economic concerns that are impacted by trade. What impact? I already talked about most of these already, what the impact is going to be. And so what I want to do is I don't want to repeat myself. So what I want to do is go, what should you do? This is the meat of my presentation, is what you should do as a farmer, what you should do as a business. And I'm going to give you some specific remedies, things that you might consider. First of all, you have to look at your company or organization and see how all of this is going to impact your industry, because it's going to be different depending on which industry you're in. You're going to be in an industry, everybody's going to be impacted, but some are going to be impacted more than others. So whatever your industry, if you're a farmer or if you are a manufacturer of some other product, you need to say, where am I right now? How is my industry involved in this? Some people say, oh, my trade doesn't impact me. Well, I'm going to tell you it does. I'm going to give you some examples of why it impacts almost everybody. So I say, first thing, examine your business or organizations. And what I mean is go into your business, financially speaking, do an audit of your finances, make certain you know where every cent is going, make certain that you understand that we're in a volatile period. And you have to know, you have to really look at what's going on in your operation. I recommend highly that you get a film, and the Tenney Group is in North Carolina. They didn't ask me to do a promotion for them. But for farmers, the Tenney Group has been helping farmers with their taxes and financial planning for years. And almost every event I go to in the 1890 university sphere, the Tenney Group is there. And I believe that they, from all I hear from farmers, and I listen to farmers, that they provide excellent services. So you need to know where you are financially, if your business is incorporated properly, and to make certain that you're getting all the tax advantages that you deserve. Okay, this is a time in history, say tariff-proof your operation. You need to be Scrooge. This is not time to be thinking about big expenditures and looking at, doing some elaborate whatever. You need to be Scrooge right about now. You need to keep track of tariff relief grants that are going to come out through U.S. Department of Agriculture. And you can also look at grants.gov, because they put them there sometimes, the different grants, and apply for them. They're out there for you, especially farmers. So apply for them. And then you should consider community supported agriculture. And what is that? That means you could be an egg producer, for example, and you could get customers who will buy your eggs before they're even, made, before they come from the chicken. You already can have clients who are lined up, say, okay, I'm going to take 2 dozen this week. You develop this delivery service, community supported agriculture, is something that you really need to consider now. E-commerce, having people be able to, on your cell phone, be able to order food directly from you on their cell phone. This time, it's growing like mushrooms. Go to China. Oh my God, they use it all the time. In the Middle East, when I was in Saudi Arabia, or especially during COVID in the UAE, they use phones all the time to order food. It's not just, it's coming fresh food that are fruits and vegetables. Ecotourism, agro-tourism, developing your farm operation to a point where you can actually help it make money for you outside of producing a product or a crop. And I was at North Carolina A&T's Small Farms Week about a year or so ago. And I heard the head of this company, oh, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. I want to talk the e-platform part, excuse me, on the click. That should have been something I discussed before I started talking about the agro-tourism. But if you're looking for a platform that provides you an avenue to sell your product in the United States, I know they're doing it in China, they're doing it in the UAE, but this is a US developed platform for you being able to sell your products online and to be able to build your business and clientele together. And again, they didn't ask me to do anything for them. I sought them out. And the reason why is because I'm very familiar with their product after having traveled so much to the different 1890 university events. As I didn't say at the beginning, as agriculture advisor for the 1890 Universities Foundation, I should have given them a plug at the very beginning. But regardless, the E platform is part of the future, and this is part of what you should be looking at in terms of taking your business another level. Now let's get to Seven Springs Vineyard. Now the fact that they now I know this might have an impact. The fact that they make their own wines might have a little bit to do with their success, but they host festivals, concerts, galas. They have actually put in lodging for people to stay overnight. They can host a big event. They even host events for people coming from overseas sometimes, groups that come to the United States and they want to have this kind of a venue. And they have made it, at least according to their presentation at North Carolina A&T Small Farms Week, they made it a profitable business in addition to their regular agriculture. They involve their neighbors' farms, so there will be no problem. Everybody gets a piece of the pie. And the thing that I like almost most about them is they said that security is a number 1 priority. So they are very anal about making certain that the venue is secure and that there's no, they don't have any problem with any kind of adverse negative incidents at the facility. They bring in bands, performers, etc. Now that's the kind of agro-tourism, I think, maybe not at this scale, but something to take your farming operation to another level in terms of outreach and in terms of ability to earn revenue. Look at these USDA programs that are coming out. During the first trade war, the Trump administration, the US provided $23 billion in federal subsidies for companies impacted by the trade tariffs. And a lot of that money went to row crop producers of soy, US wheat, cotton, the big commodities, not a lot at the small. And then there was $27 billion worth of losses. So that means that there's a difference there. And that difference, people just lost that money. Okay, let's be real. Now, just May the 19th, Secretary Rollins, Secretary of Agriculture, just announced farms called Farmers First, Small Family Farms Policy Agenda. Don't know what that means yet. All it means is that they plan to do something, but in terms of the dollars they're going to put behind it, I don't know. So that's up to you to follow the USDA website, grants.gov, to see if you're eligible for any of what's going to come out of this announcement that was just made a few days ago. And yeah, and always keep an eye out for those things. This is a picture of the Congress. I advise at this stage in tariffs and in government programs that have been terminated that you were a part of, that you don't sit back and be quiet, that at this time in history, you need to speak up. You need to contact your congressman, your governor, your senator, anybody who's in a position that has a voice, and have them know what impact this is having on your operation. This whole thing of DEI cuts and the civil rights organization cuts, it's impacted a lot of organizations, a lot of them, and small and cooperatives. And I know for a fact, cooperatives, a lot of entities have been harmed by the recent developments. Don't be quiet about it, because if they don't hear from you, you don't exist. So you got to make certain that your voice is heard. The takeaway lessons: trade is a process, it takes time. Tariff uncertainty breeds uncertainty, which means that the stock market, bond market are going to go crazy. So protect your money, because don't think it's all over, because we got sort of a framework of an agreement with the UK. and a framework of agreement with China for 90 days. That doesn't mean this is over. It means that we're in sort of a wait and see mode. Expect inflation rates to go up, slower economic growth. There's already a lot of rumblings about people getting laid off. I mean, I'm sorry to hear that, but it's true. Assess your own company's situation or organization situation. It's time to be Scrooge. It's not time to be spending all over the place. The US economy is in for a tough, rough ride. And for any of you who are interested in pursuing this topic, and I started what's called Tariffs and Trade Forum and this is way before I'd met anybody from Freedmen Heirs Foundation. And I started this on my own initiative because I wanted to be able to help companies and help people get through this period. And I'll guarantee you that this period is a lot longer than people in the press are saying it's going to be, because the impact of tariffs comes later. It's not at the beginning. So we haven't even felt it yet. So we will start feeling it though, because it's imminent. It's already starting to happen. So with that, be happy to answer any questions and give answers to almost anything you might want to ask me about trade.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Gray. This was such a great and informative webinar presentation. We do have a question in the webinar chat. What would a farmer need to track to prove that they were affected by the tariffs to be eligible for a grant? So I think they're asking, like, what are some metrics that they need to keep track of or know about so that when they apply for the grant, they'll know they'll be eligible for it.
You know, I have not seen the guidelines for this. Well, this tranche of relief has not been announced yet. This is in the talks phase right now. The last time we had the trade war, around 2018, then Department of Agriculture got money through the Commodity Credit Corporation. Make a long story short, as a financial entity that a lot of U.S. government programs in agriculture are funded through the Commodity Credit Corporation. I know that the secretary is trying to get money replenished in for the what we call CCC, and in order to announce a new program. Now, the big tricky issue is that question. That question is so excellent because this is what caused a lot of farmers not be able to apply, is because they didn't have records to show that they were exporting. And that's a hard one for some farmers because sometimes they would export to a company or sell to a company, and then that company would actually do the trading and the exporting, which means technically you didn't export it. So it's hard for you to say that this is an impact of exports on your company. But I think the right answer is to keep track of your company's sales to companies, even if they are companies that are exporting the product after, because it's going to be a matter of your record keeping that's going to allow you to have the kind of information you need to be able to benefit from that federal subsidy program that's going to come. It's going to come. But that's a great question.
Thank you. We have another question. In 2008, it appears in 2025 as well, there was specific trade relief for farmers and producers. Did that relief or will the anticipated relief extend to the entire supply chain?
No, I
Just
don't
the
think so. No, just being straightforward. I don't think it will. I think the last time what happened is that a lot of small farmers got left out of the equation. The big agribusinesses who had all the documentation, had everything available. And then the way the US government subsidy program is set up right now, and it's been set up for many years, it provides huge subsidies to what they call row crops, the wheat, the corn, soybeans, those crops, cotton, etc. Those kinds of commodities have traditionally gotten very good subsidies, but it's more difficult for a farmer who has 100 acres, 200 acres, to actually apply for those relief programs. They are not normally exporting, but they are impacted by the tariffs. Now, before I roll off into another part of the answer to that question, I would say that the answer is no. It did not reach then. I don't think it's going to reach this time. That's the reason why I believe that new policy for small farmers was announced already, because they know that it did not work for small farmers the last go around, but this go around, they are intending to put something in place. So we don't know what we don't know. We can't tell you what we haven't seen yet in terms of the USDA policy announcement. So before I start speculating more, I'm just going to let it rest like that. My firm answer and firm belief is it will not cover the supply chain.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. If there are any additional questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Mr. Gray, I have a question for you. So, can you share examples, because you have an extensive professional career in trade. Can you share examples of how trade disputes, such as what we're involved in now in the United States, impact local economies beyond the ag sector?
Yes, I can. There are a lot of folks who think that trade doesn't impact them,
Mhm.
and small farmers need to get out of that notion, because I'll just take input costs for an example. Let's use equipment, the big John Deeres and the big machinery manufacturers manufacture these big tractors that are used hundreds of thousands of dollars a tractor or harvester, and they produce for the big farmer. A lot of the small farmers machinery comes imported. It's an imported item, because a lot of the producers and foreign countries are still producing at a relatively, in some ways, lower acreage. So that means the price that a farmer is going to pay for a smaller piece of farm equipment is going to increase. That's one way. And then the other part is that the the supply chain of product that comes into the grocery store is going to be disrupted, because what we're accustomed to in America, we somewhat spoiled. What we do is you can go get an apple, you can go get an orange, you can get any kind of product almost year round. And a lot of that product is coming from other places. So it means that the supply network, in terms of your ability as a community to get food, is going to be disrupted. Now, some people will say, okay, well, that means the local farmer is going to be able to produce. But when I was a kid, they used to can stuff, canning, and to put stuff in the bottles, the mason bottles, and can things for my mother used to be ready. So, you don't know what the winter is going to be like. So they always had their canning and everything set up. So we're looking for a major disruption in supply. There's some more issues that are involved with that's going to, this whole thing of, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the labor shortages
Yes.
that we are experiencing already before the trade tariffs, before the new immigration push. There was always a trade tariff. I was sitting beside, we had gone to an agricultural event dinner here in DC area, where I was sitting at the table with a head of a union for Mexican workers. And he told me, he said, we have problems finding labor. There are not a lot of people who want to get out there in that field and do that kind of work. And the only reason why our immigrant labor was actually doing that work is because that was their way to get here, and that was the only avenue for them to make any money. So the labor cost associated with producing is going to impact all farmers, but it's going to be doubly hard for our small farmers who are not going to be able to hire day labor to help do certain things on the farm. So yeah, the impact is going to have wider than just a company paying a tariff. It's going to have a combined with the other things that are going on in the economy. Then I want to add one other thing. I wanted to add that when the U.S. Agency for International Development was dismantled, there were traditionally $2.1 billion worth of food the government used to purchase from farmers, and a lot of them small farmers, for export to different countries that are in food deficit who need the food from the United States. Well, that's at least it's been slow, if not stopped. A lot of that food went to waste, according to what I've been reading. And so we don't know what the future of those aid programs are going to be. And USDA has a similar program we call PO 480 program. And the PO 480 program is sort of what in limbo as to how that's going to work going forward. So farmers are getting hit from a lot of sides. And so the local community is going to be hit as well, because in a lot of local communities, if you don't have a good farming sector, a good farming apparatus and operation, then you're going to be the economy of that local community is not going to be good.
Thank you. I
Mhm.
think you made some excellent points there, especially about how far-reaching it is in other parts of our daily lives that we don't always get a chance to think about. And especially you're not seeing such an in-depth take when we're looking at the news outlets and reading articles and things of that nature. Last question for you. So, in the times past, the U.S. has always been a major player on the export stage. Given where we are now with this administration, the trade wars, what and these I'm asking for your own personal thoughts. What do you see on the horizon for the US? Will we step back as being a major player and a lot of the market share that we're giving up, let's say to China, South America, will we be able to gain that back? Because right now we're enemy number one. Or do you anticipate the US now not necessarily continuing to be the front runner on the trade scene?
Good question. And I'm going to give a good answer. Trade, and if you go back to the picture of me in that in Qatar talking to Mr. Laurie, trade is a process. Trade takes time. And the US government, through its market access program, has been gives millions of dollars to trade associations such as the Southern United States Trade Association, Western United States Agricultural Trade Association, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you notice, our new Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Rollins, has been traveling around the world on trade missions to try to shore up more business overseas. Now, the problem is that the trade that we are losing to Canada, for example, will it come back? When the political situation between the two countries repairs, I believe it will, but it's going to have an impact on the immediate sales. And then the problem that I see is not so much, I think that we will repair relationships with Canada and Mexico. I can't see that being frayed but too long. Those are our major trading partners.
Mhm.
But the BRICS, the new trading blocks that are aligning with China, that those countries, we're going to start losing some of that. That I don't know whether we're going to get back, because a lot of countries, let's say I'll use Africa as an example. Africa is buying a ton of product of everything from China. Of course, China gets a lot from us in food speaking, in food wise, but they are also in Africa buying a lot of everything else from China. And when I was in Ethiopia, they would always say, If we buy it from China, we're gonna have to buy it again pretty soon because we know it's gonna tear up and it'll be cheaper. But we buy it from US, it's gonna be better quality. That's when they were liking us and we provided food aid, etc. But now, given that we pulled out, we don't have that kind of leverage or that kind of goodwill in a lot of African countries. So, in my opinion, the African market, I'm taking it off the playing field. And let me don't get me wrong, the African market is the fastest growing market. The fastest growing middle classes in Africa right now. We're missing a tremendous opportunity to get in that market now, which might not come. We're already behind the game in Africa. Asia, the Asian countries were fighting China. Now they're trying to partner with China. I don't know whether we're ever going to get that one back. We might sustain the EU. The UK and the rest of the European Union have separated because of Brexit. So we made a trade deal, a tentative framework of a trade deal with the UK, a trade deal with the UK, which is we already have a surplus with them. So what's the big benefit? So the rest of the European Union, they're not happy with us right now,
Right.
and they're looking for other suppliers. So will we lose them? Probably not in everything, but we're going to lose some ground with them. So just to make it, to summarize, is I don't think we're going to lose Mexico and Canada because they're too close and the economies are entwined. I do believe we might lose out in Asian countries that are surrounding China. They used to see China as the enemy. Now China is a good playing partner right now. And I think we lost Africa because I don't know what leverage we have in Africa. We don't have any. And they don't like the way we left. We just left. And so, yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Gray. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. We're a little bit over for the webinar today, but I do appreciate everyone who joined us. Please join us again. Great news, Mr. Gray. We'll do a part 2 at the end of the year. And so we'll get a chance to see how things shake out as we get ready to head into 2026. So stay tuned for that. For those of you that follow the webinar series that we produce here at Freedmen Heirs Foundation, there will be no webinar next month in June, but stay tuned and we will provide information on our July webinar series. So once again, thank you everyone and have a great afternoon. And for those of you all who are wondering, we will be providing a copy of this presentation to all the registrants, and it will be on the Freedmen Heirs Foundation YouTube page. So check us out there. Again, everybody have a great day and enjoy the long holiday weekend too.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day, everybody.
All righty. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. This has been a wonderful presentation. It was a lot of great points in there, Mr. Gray, that I'm excited to go back and look at it again and write down some notes. But thank you for the last question, because that's something that I've been wondering. And I think you're right. I think we will not likely recapture a lot of the market share that we've lost.
Yeah. All righty. Take
All right.
care.
Take care.
Mm-hmm.